Retry is yet another fault-tolerant pattern offered by Resilience4j. Retry, as the name indicates, it retries a failed operation a certain number of times before giving up. And this might be useful when you expect that the failure could resolve on its own. For example, a temporary glitch in the network or a momentary high load. So when a service call fails, the system waits for a short delay and tries again, and the process repeats until the maximum retry attempts are reached. For example, if service A is calling service B, and B is not responding because of a temporary glitch in the network, then instead of coming to conclusion that B is not responding, it might be worthwhile to retry sending requests multiple times and see if it is responding. Actually, we can accomplish the same with circuit breaker as well. Circuit breaker allows us to configure retry mechanism with wait duration between each retry. However, this will give us more fine-grained control over how we want to retry. For example, retry pattern will give us these options. Fixed retry retries an operation at set number of times at equal intervals. Exponential backoff, on the other hand, retries with increased time intervals between attempts, incorporating a randomized delay. We can also have custom strategies, which allows for a tailored retry intervals based on specific use cases. So here is how we can use retry mechanism. Obviously, we have to first include Resilience4j Spring Boot dependency. And here is an example of configuring retries with Resilience4j in the application.yaml file. The myRetry instance is set to attempt retries a maximum of 5 times, with a fixed delay of 1000 milliseconds between retries. Exponential backoff is the strategy we are using and is enabled with a multiplier of 2, meaning the delay increases after each attempt. The maximum wait duration between retries is set to 10,000 milliseconds. Once we have that configuration, we can start using retry strategy. The call external service method is annotated with retry, specifying the myRetry instance, and a fallback method named fallback method. If the service call fails, the fallback method is triggered, providing a custom response with the error message. The retry logic will attempt to call the external service again if there are failures. The fallback method is invoked only when the retry attempts are exhausted and the operation still fails after retry attempts. We can also configure and use retries programmatically with functional API. In this example, the call external service with retry method demonstrates how we can manually configure retries. A custom retry config is created with a maximum of 5 retry attempts, a 1000 millisecond delay between retries, and retries are triggered only on runtime exception. A retry object is then created using the configuration. The retry.decorateSupplier method wraps the call external service method, adding the retry logic. The service is called using supplier.get, and if it fails after all retry attempts, a fallback response is returned with the exception message. We can also combine circuit breaker and retry strategies to get the best of both the worlds. In this code, a circuit breaker and a retry mechanism are configured and combined to handle failures and retries for an external call service. First, a circuit breaker is created with a failure rate threshold of 50%, a sliding window size of 100, and a 10-second wait duration in the open state. It allows 10 test calls in the half open state. Next, a retry object is created with a maximum of 5 retry attempts and a 2-second delay between retries. These two mechanisms are then combined using circuitbreaker.decorate function and retry.decorate function, wrapping the external service call method in both retry and circuit breaker logic. So this way we can ensure that the external call is retried with specified conditions and protected by circuit breaker to prevent overwhelming the service during failures. A much more simpler approach to combine both these strategies is by using annotations. In this code, both circuit breaker and retry mechanisms are applied using annotations. The external call service method is annotated with both circuit breaker and retry. The circuit breaker annotation is configured with circuit breaker named myServiceCircuitBreaker, and there must be some configuration associated with it, and a fallback method as well, called fallback, which is called when the circuit breaker is triggered. The retry annotation is configured with a retry policy named myServiceRetry. When the external call service method is executed, it attempts to call an unreliable service, and if it fails, it will retry the operation as per the retry policy. If the retries fail, the fallback method is invoked, returning a response that includes the exception message.